For our project, we chose to model long-term potentiation, which is a phenomenon that neuroscientists think underlies memory formation in the brain. This process occurs when two neurons form a synapse or a connection between one another. Over time, if one neuron frequently activates the next neuron in a particular firing pattern, the connection becomes much stronger, and then subsequently, when the first neuron fires, the second neuron is almost sure to fire afterwards. In our model, you can see on the left side of the screen the red nodes, which represent input neurons, or from a neuroscience perspective, maybe sensory neurons, like neurons that sense light or sound. In the middle of the screen, you see our network of interneurons. Pressing setup changes this configuration in a random way every time, so that you get a different network and you can try out different behaviors and see how the initial condition of the network affects subsequent behavior. Initially, the network is set up with weak links that are, and the neurons are connected according to this slider called average neuron degree. This represents the average number of neurons that each neuron is connected to. The user can also set the number of neurons in the simulation and the number of input neurons. Let's see what happens when we press go. So as you can see in this screenshot, all of the red connections are the connections that are inactive, whereas the green ones are the ones that are active on this particular time tick. White neurons are the ones that are sending stimuli at this time. Pink neurons have not yet ever been activated in the network. Yellow neurons are receiving stimuli, but they are not receiving enough stimuli in order to actually activate their output connections. And that is controlled by this action potential threshold slider here. So when a neuron fires, it's called an action potential. That's when it sends information to another neuron. And the way neurons work, which actually makes them really good for computer modeling, is that they sum all of their inputs and then they determine whether that level of input is greater than or less than a particular threshold. If the input's greater than the threshold, the neuron will send information in an all or nothing manner to all of its different connections. If it's less than the threshold, it will do nothing at all. So the user can set this action potential threshold as you wish. We also have this slider called memory threshold, and that's actually a property of the links themselves. And that's what controls long-term potentiation. So we can see in this model that the links are thickened when long-term potentiation has occurred. And so when a link is activated a number of times, in this case we've set it to be every other tick, and it needs to be set, and that needs to occur 2 times in a row. The neuron needs to be activated for 2 successive patterns of every other tick. Then the connection will become a strong connection, and we say that long-term potentiation has occurred in that case. All right, so let's watch the model go a little bit longer. All right, so we can see some blue nodes showing up, and that represents neurons have a property called refractory period. So just the way the properties of ion channels in real neurons work, if a neuron fires, it really can't fire continuously because the neuron really can't keep firing all the time. It has to sort of rest for a period. So these blue neurons represent neurons that are in their refractory period because they just fired on the last tick and they can't fire on the next tick, even if they are stimulated above the threshold. Let's go a little bit longer. We can see on our graphs over here, we have the total link activity and then the proportion of strong neurons that are strong links that are that have been created. And we just noticed in our simulation this type of emergent behavior. So you can see this really cool spike in the graph of link activity, and this happened like quite a few times when we were trying out the simulations. When one neuron is really highly interconnected, if there's a strong link that forms going to it, then the whole network becomes much stronger. And you can see that has occurred in this region over here. There are a bunch of strong links that have just formed. So there we go.